Talking about the state of the world, the networks wanna feed ya. I'm talking about the global multimedia. It's all enough to drive a sane man to distraction. All they give us is a knee-jerk reaction. You know it's easy to forget how much they need you. Those people behind the desk in the global multimedia. It's all a ratings game. The news reports are all the same. A pretty face, every hair in place. But what they tell you is just another knee-jerk reaction. A knee-jerk reaction. I wonder how much they all conspire to deceive you. Photoshopped and overdubbed is the norm in global media. The Jim and Terry Show, only it's just the Terry Show today. Jim has a bad cold and is unavailable to be chatting it up, saving his throat for more important conversations. At least, that's what I believe. Unless, Jim, you're faking it. Are you faking it? Fake news, Jim. We need you to show up for this dialogue. The dialogue is based on the song that I began with, Knee Jerk Reaction, featuring Ray Brooks from Sydney, Australia, doing the instrumentation for that gorgeous, what do I call it? Is it R&B? Is it pop? Is it funk? It's got a huge Chicago-like horn section in it and some great guitar riffing by Ray. And all I did was have to lend my voice to delivering his acerbic message. The global multimedia, the global news conglomerations, the Murdoch enterprises of the world. It's not just Rupert Murdoch, but it's everywhere where you might find editorial bias, selective news editing. You might even find a Tucker Carlson or some other extremely biased and hostile news personality. I'm not going to call them journalists. I'm not going to call them reporters. I'm not going to dignify them with the titles that would go with real journalism. They're just talking heads. Great band, by the way, Talking Heads. Now, that song is really talking about giving everybody what they want to hear rather than what might serve the greater public interest to hear. That would include your bias that goes with whatever your political agenda is. In the case of Fox, they continue to air the fake news, the fake lie, the big lie of Donald Trump claiming all throughout 2020, 2021, 2022, fake elections. Yeah, Trump, you're just one big orange fake balloon. And I do love the baby Trump blimp that was in many of the anti-Trump parades, especially over in Europe and in the UK. Yeah, when news becomes serving up what you think your audience wants to hear, it becomes not journalism. It becomes propaganda. So what do the various news networks think their base is? In the case of Fox, we know what their base is. They're competing with the same base that appeals to One American News Network or Newsmax. Far right, not just right, not just slightly right, not anything to do with center, just basically anger. I call it rage baiting. when you try to stir up and trigger your audience and make them feel indignant, righteous anger. Why? Because maybe their base is devoutly Southern Baptist, devoutly Christian, devoutly evangelical, and the services, the news services, think they know what that white, mostly evangelical Southern audience might want to hear, which is America was great because it was Christian. America was great because it had family values. America was great because women stayed at home, barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. America was great because we kept voting rights limited and restricted. We didn't allow blacks to vote. We didn't allow minorities to vote. We didn't allow women to vote for the longest time. So there you go, a whole bunch of rage baiting in some news networks. Knee-jerk reaction talks about every hair in place. The whole thing is a shtick. And for Tucker Carlson, his shtick was up. And they found reason enough to fire him. Now, should anybody else be fired? Well, Don Lemon was let go from CNN, making some consistent gaffes. Is that a right word to say? Mistakes, errors, owning up to them. But, if you got a pattern of saying the same kinds of things, in Don Lemon's case, I think it was misogynistic and perhaps ageist. Those were the two that finally, I think, broke the camel's back in terms of CNN administration. I'm not so sure. I sort of thought Don Lemon, back in the days of Chris Cuomo, were news bros. Now maybe they're just buddies in bad times, because both of them were let go by CNN. It's time to hold anchors, news reporters, journalists accountable for what they say. And if you're saying stuff that is A, not true, B, extremely biased, then maybe we should go to the middle. Find some kind of centrist position where you can lean a little to the right. Well, that's the way Jim prefers to slice his political views, slightly to the right. Whereas I tend to be maybe not slightly to the left, maybe more dominantly to the left. But we agree on certain things, and one is, if you say something, own up to it, and if you are corrupt, you should be held accountable for that corruption. And we will disagree on some of the details. Some of the facts may be exposed in right-wing newspapers. Some of the facts may be exposed in left-wing. Do I say newspapers? Yeah, I'm still a print-based person. Under the belief, rightly or wrongly, that if you're going to put your name to something in print, it amounts to something like a handshake or a verbal agreement. It's a contract. You promise that you've done all the vetting of the news that you are going to report and the sources that you consider reliable. I used to like the show Reliable Sources because I thought that is really the essence of the discussion in, what do we call it, a post-truth generation, where the media can say whatever they want and people either choose their network because of their political bias, or they choose their network because of the TV personalities presenting that bias, or they really don't care about stuff like that. I, for one, care, and I spend quite a bit of time trying to get to the reliable sources. And let me give you a hint. Fox is not a reliable source, never has been. Neither is OAN on News Network, One American News, and neither is Newsmax. And if you're getting your source from Fox still, after all the revelations, there's something wrong with your processing powers. And it's time to cut and run. What's that expression? You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Well, fold them if you're a Fox News addict. Get off the addiction, get off the toxin, get off the poison, and find some expanding horizons. I think I made this note at one point that you should consider a variety of news sources, some from the left, some from the center, some from the right, in order to see how stories, news, is breaking. It breaks, and sources have to be verified, and the way it's presented is where the bias comes in. The bias is the interpretation of the particular news anchor or journalist who's doing the presenting. They have a bias. They try to put it on hold and in check, and you do that by having guests who disagree. And that was one thing I enjoyed about Chris Cuomo's program on CNN back in the day, 4 or 5 years ago, when he would bring in contrarians, people who disagreed with him, and he would put them under the microscope and try to analyze these people and what they're saying, hold them accountable for their words, because words do matter. Mean what you say what you mean. I'll give you an example of spin. The term pro-life and abortion were on opposite ends of a value scale, where if you were pro-life somehow, you were perceived to be doing God's will by preserving the sanctity of life. And yet, I would say that more on abortion as women's health care and withdrawing abortion as a health care, not a product, but a service available to women for their health, that's come up. And we need to start slicing abortion as pro-women's life and pro-life as pro-fetal life, the unborn child, the fetus. And yes, we all need to protect life and the sanctity of life, but that includes all life, not just the fetus. And if you are saying women must bear to full term unwanted children, I'm not sure that that is a policy that is going to make America great again. And yet most Republicans and conservatives in Canada, under the Conservative Party banner of Pierre Poilievre, would hold abortion rights to be not something up for discussion. He's pro-life, and that's all there is to it. No discussion. And yet, for millions of Canadian women, for millions of American women, for millions of women everywhere, the right to control your body and not to have, in the case of Senates and Congresses, old white guys making decisions for women's health. It's just beyond me how you think that's rational, how you think that's anything but misogynistic. It's picking on women, making them second class, third class. I don't know. It's certainly not equal to men, at least in my opinion. So there you go, the media. What you choose to consume, well, as one person said to me, what you eat today walks and talks tomorrow, and that's the same as our media diet. It invariably affects how we perceive the world around us. Are you open-minded or are you dogmatic? Do you think you have all the answers? Or perhaps, as in Mark Twain's old adage, faith is believing what you know ain't so. Words from Mark Twain, worth paying attention to, I think. Anyway, there we go, knee-jerk reaction. Know what your sources are, know what you believe is credible, understand why you think it's credible, including identifying your own perspective so you can separate yourself from the message. You are what you consume. Be careful of your media diet in case it tips you too far to the right or too far to the left. Down the middle, like a donut. Bye-bye for now.